Hello and welcome to episode 5 of Moon March and Mahayana. This time I'm going to try and tackle the elephant in the room, which is the Sanskrit term karma. Of course, everybody's heard of karma because it's become a staple of Western pop culture in the last couple of decades, and it really is a huge topic, arguably even bigger than a lot of other topics that I'm going to mention or comment on. The most important thing from my current point of view is that even a lot of people who actively identify themselves as Buddhists in the West seem to believe karma just means action, which it literally does, but that it means action in a sense of a mechanistic law of action and reaction, and that, simply speaking, that's just not what karma and karmic theory is about in the Buddhist context. Now, of course, the different Buddhist schools don't have one unified idea of what karma is, or rather how it works when it comes to the details. And then if you go to earlier Hindu or Vedic, or maybe even pre-Vedic ideas, if one can trace them, then there's a completely different understanding there as well. So I'm trying to speak from a broad, superficial Mahayana perspective. The one thing you should understand is that intention is key when it comes to discussing karma and how it works and what it is in the Buddhist context. It is not just an idea of, like the law of gravity. It has so much to do with your intentions, with your powers of volition, and it represents an extremely dynamic process or processes that interact with one another. Now, of course, you could argue, well, sorry, this is just some kind of old idea, and it's not scientific. Even if you go to, let's say, Vasubandhu, and you go to these kind of, some of the, let's say, core texts that deal with, or try to summarize some of the models, how this should work. Even if you say, but that's not true science, it's like, well, that may be right. The point still stands. If you use it in a Buddhist context, it should reflect the generally accepted Buddhist meaning. Otherwise, it's really meaningless to use the term. Now, the one thing you should take away is that intention makes karma in a Buddhist sense. And I'm just going to show you like two different points of departure when it comes to explaining karma. Although I usually just refer to Mahayana commentators and works, I, like many people, am a big fan of Bhikkhu Bodhi's amazing translations and explanations when it comes to the Pali sources and the Theravada. And since in Mahayana we do not dismiss the suttas, or sutras as we call it, but I'm just going to quote him from his In the Buddha's Words, which is an anthology, that's actually the subtitle, an anthology of discourses from the Pali Canon. So he mentioned at some point, he says, the word kamma, which is of course in Sanskrit karma, the word kamma literally means action, but technically it refers to volitional action. There you have it. As the Buddha says, it is volition that I call kamma, for having willed, one acts by body, speech and mind. Kamma thus denotes deeds that originate from volition. Such volition may remain purely mental, generating mental karma, or kamma, that occurs as thoughts, plans and desires, or it may come to expression outwardly through manifest bodily and verbal actions. There you have it. To give you another short take, I'm going to quote from Ken McLeod's Wake Up to Your Life, because I think he just has a great way of communicating some key concepts. And he actually also says, it's been a while since I used this, karma is a Sanskrit word that means action. In Tibetan usage, the term is often expanded to action, seed, result. The basic idea is that karma is a process in which actions develop into experiences in the same way that seeds develop into plants that bear fruit. Anything? Yeah. And then I'm not going to go into the following, but just so you've heard of it, according to classical teaching, an action becomes a karmic seed when 4 conditions are met: activation, execution, object, and completion. Now, the idea of karmic seeds and the models of how karma in a Buddhist sense works, that is a topic of high complexity, and we've had more than 2 millennia of highly realized and highly learned people delving into these topics. What I want you to take away from this, and I'm repeating myself, but it is worth repeating, is that karma is not some simplistic, mechanistic idea of simple action and reaction. It is a key term referring to how our intentions shape our future and shape our experience, what we're experiencing. And as a little PS here, what is clear, when the Buddha was asked in some of the sutras, to talk about these things, he sometimes may have given answers pointing to the fact that to truly understand this, the sheer complexity of this is rather mind-blowing. He didn't say mind-blowing, but what I want you also to understand is that even if there are different models that might not all agree with one another, it is super interesting to have a concept that puts you in charge of your own situation for better and worse. Now, if you do not believe in free will at all, if you don't think there is any degree of volition, then basic Buddhist concepts of how, let's say, the world works make absolutely no sense, and also anything related to karma will make no sense. If you don't believe in the individual powers of volition and intention, even to a tiny degree, then anything that follows from that also is not obviously going to make sense in the way how you approach something. I hope this is enough to get you started. I'm going to link to to a really good book, I think, that was written by a Tibetan teacher a while ago, who had also, I think, a great understanding of how our Western minds usually work in terms of how Western culture shapes how we see things. So that might actually be helpful, and I hope this will aid you in understanding some of my future references when I talk about karma. And PPS, the way that karmic seeds are supposed to ripen or can bear fruit, to use that term, it doesn't necessarily, what you now do if you perform intentional actions, if you, let's say, create or act in a literally karmic way, it doesn't mean that this is something you do in this life will come to fruition in this life. In the same way, yes, if you are in a really amazing situation right now and that you can encounter the Dharma and you can practice it, then that is very, very, very likely the result of previous karmic seeds. But you don't know if not very, very soon some other karmic seeds might actually bear fruit and ripen as something really, really terrible, because it's a really, really, really dynamic, interwoven process of unbelievable complexity that is being pointed to when we use karma. So you should not expect your next life necessarily to be also great, even if you're doing a slightly decent job right now, because you don't know exactly at what point what karmic seeds might ripen into what. But that would be another topic on its own, maybe to compare these slightly different models of different Buddhist commentators or teachers, and what they have in common or what the major points of contention were. It's definitely different from some of the mainstream Hindu definitions and how karma is used there, and you should definitely not trust the explanations of maybe very well-meaning but ultimately uninformed New Age teachers who usually lump together these things to talk about karma, and then they neither represent specific Hindu traditions nor would they represent different Buddhist traditions, but they are basically satisfying their customers' need for something that is superficial and seems very easy to grasp, so it's easier to sell and marketable. Having said that, of course, not all of us have the privilege of being able to study these things in depth, but it is important to at least know what one doesn't know. And one doesn't have to be a Donald Rumsfeld fan to know that there's, known knowns and known unknowns and all that kind of thing. Have a lovely week, and probably you'll hear from me soon.